Welcome back to my YouTube channel and podcast, Wonders and Miracles, where we get to celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm your host, Liza Lawrence, and I'm so happy to have you join me today as we talk with Deana from Idaho. Today, Deana is going to share a few miracles and answers to prayers that she experienced while her husband, Craig, was in the hospital in October of 2021. After they had both just come out of quarantine from COVID, Deana's husband went to the hospital with chest pains. She will share with us the details from there, but before we jump into this episode, if you love miracle stories and want to hear more, just hit the like and subscribe button so you can catch all the inspiring and uplifting episodes of real people sharing real miracles. So, Deana, thanks for being here, and go ahead and tell us your story.
Thank you. So I probably get a little weepy because I tend to.
That's okay. We feel the spirit when that happens, right? It touches us.
That's right. So I will preface this whole thing with, when I was a little girl, I was very, very close to my grandfather, and he would take me everywhere with him. And he died when I was, I think, 5. I don't think I was quite 6. I think I was 5. But he would, like I said, take me everywhere. We went to farm and ranch stores. We would go to the hardware store. And every time we went, I would always find pennies. Now, as an adult, thinking back, I can probably think that he was probably leaving those pennies for me to find. Ever since, and as being an adult, when I was going through something hard or really anything, if something was really weighing on my mind, it seemed like I would find pennies from just out of the blue. And in fact, it used to be so bad, I always put them in my left pocket and I would carry them with me all the time. And I would just have a couple of pennies in my left pocket. So, and I always felt that was my grandfather telling me, like, hey, you're being heard. Things are going to be okay. And so I preface the story with that because it comes into play.
And I love that. I think that's so sweet that that's your connection with heaven and your grandfather.
I still find them.
I love it.
So yes, in September of 2021, it was the very first time, I had gotten COVID. It's crazy. And it hit me pretty hard. And so I was on quarantine for 14 days. And of course, my husband being a casualty of that, he also was diagnosed with it. He actually wasn't nearly as bad as I was. He was still taking care of the both of us, running errands. I was down for the count. It was bad. But when I came out of it, I worked in retail management at the time. And I'm working in retail. It's, especially in management, you don't take Fridays off. It's one of those things where it's all hands on tech, because Fridays and Saturdays are typically your busiest days. So those aren't days you generally get off, especially being management. But I say that because when I came back from my quarantine, I worked 9 or 10 days straight. I can't remember what it was, just to help kind of get everything back to going the way it was supposed to. And so because of that, I actually had a Friday off, which was crazy. And my husband had just gone back to work on that Monday. At the time, he was also training to run a half marathon. He is a runner. He's run 3 full marathons, 6 halves, and I can't even tell you how many other races. So that Friday, he was supposed to work at 2. He was a corrections officer, so he would work from 2 to 11 or 2 to 10. And he was getting ready, and he told me, hey, I'm going to go out for a run. Going to probably do 8 miles. He always told me how far because I knew in my mind about how long a mile would take him to run, so I knew when to expect him back. So he left, and he wasn't gone, maybe 15 minutes. He was very short. And he came back in, and I said, are you okay? And he said to me, he goes, I don't feel right. And I said, well, what doesn't feel right? And he said, I don't really know. Like, he was really short of breath. He was sweating a lot, which wasn't normal that quickly. So I kept kind of questioning him, like, what doesn't feel right? What's wrong? And he said, I don't know. And then he kind of opened up with, my chest kind of hurts. And I said, do you think we should go to the hospital? And he sat for a minute and he goes, yeah, I think we should. And at that moment, I thought, oh my gosh, this is not good. So where we were living at the time, because we had sold our house, we always knew we were coming back to Idaho. We had already bought land. We were saving up to build our house here. So we had sold our house there and we were living in our RV.
And where's there? Is that California?
I'm sorry. It was, yes. So we were living in a tiny little town called Gasky. It's like 30 miles from the coast, about 30 miles. And that's where the nearest hospital was Crescent City. So we got into this truck and I got him there as quickly and as safely as I could. And when we got there, at the time, California was still very much into all the COVID restrictions. You weren't going anywhere without a mask, number one, anything else. And so I took him in, and so they ask you all the questions, your illnesses, immunizations. Well, because we had both just had it, they immediately treated him as though he still did and escorted me outside. So he went into the emergency room and I had to leave. So I went to our car, to the truck, and I sat there. And like I said, he was whisked back. And the only form of communication with anybody I had was him. I had no doctors, no nurses, nobody I could actually ask any questions to. I was relying on him to tell me anything that was going on. And so I sat there, and he wasn't even able to call me. He was trying to text me, and he was telling me, oh, they're taking my blood. So we went back and forth for a while. And according to him, the doctors are saying they don't think he's having a heart attack. His blood pressure was a little high, but they weren't sure what was going on. So they were going back and forth, doing EKGs, doing all these tests. And finally it became apparent that they were going to keep him overnight. And so they were going to be moving him from the ER to like just the med surge floor. And so I said, okay. So I ran back home, got him a phone charger because he didn't have one, got him a few personal items because at the time that I took him, he was also still in his sweaty running clothes, which they put him in a hospital gown, but he wanted some other stuff. So I went home and I got that for him, and I came back and I dropped that off, and, sat out there for a while, and I thought, I don't know what I'm doing. It's dark and I don't know what's happening. And so I left and I went back to the trailer, and I called all of our kids, and, combined, we have 6 children. And so I called them all and, just let them know what was going on. He's got 5 brothers and sisters, kind of let them know what was going on, trying to keep in touch with everybody. And at the same time, trying not to worry everyone because we didn't know if there was anything to worry about. And so the next morning I got up and I thought, okay, I'm going to call and see how his night was. So I called and I asked for the floor that he was on, and I got through. And at that time they told me, oh, they moved him to ICU the night before. And so I immediately panic because I'm thinking, why, what's wrong? And nobody could tell me anything. So then they transferred me to the ICU floor. And when they did that, they informed me it's a shift change. So nobody could talk to me right then, but that they would call me back. And so I thought, okay. So I'm sitting there and I did again text my husband, hopefully that he's awake. If not, I don't know what's going on. Hopefully he can answer me. So he answers me, tells me, I didn't sleep at all last night. I'm in horrible pain. They keep taking blood, they keep taking EKGs, still haven't told him at this point whether he's had a heart attack or not. They're telling him no. Nobody ever calls me back. Oh. Nothing. I never spoke to a doctor, never spoke to a nurse at that hospital. And I want to say it was about mid-morning, maybe early afternoon. I don't remember if he texted me or he called me, to be honest with you. But he told me that they were looking for a bed for him, that yes, he had a heart attack and they were looking for a bed because where we were on the coast, like I said, it's Crescent City, very, very small town. The hospital they have there is not equipped to really handle anything that's any sort of emergency. And so they were looking in San Francisco, they were looking in Redding, and they were looking in Medford, Oregon. Now, I am from Medford, Oregon. And I know that there they have some of the best cardiac doctors and hospitals around. And so I told him immediately, I said, I want you to go to Medford. And he goes, well, I understand, but I'm going to go wherever they tell me. And I said, I understand that too. And so I just started praying that he would go to Medford. Number one, because I knew that he would be in good hands. And number two, I also had family there. My daughter lives there. I have aunts and uncles that live there. There are people there that I know. Not that I wanted anybody at that point, but I knew them. I just prayed and I prayed. And finally he calls me. He said, they have a bed in Medford. And I said, oh, thank goodness. I'm so ecstatic. And he told me they're going to life flight me there. And I said, okay. So I'm thinking I have to get there, and it's 1.5 to 2 hours from where we were living. So I immediately just jumped in the truck and I'm on my way. And I'm thinking, he's going to get there before me. I mean, he's flying. He's going to get there before me. Well, as luck would have it, I actually got there before he did. I got to the emergency room. I went and asked for him. He wasn't there. And so I explained to them who I was, who he was, and what was happening. And they told me that when he came in, they would make sure I got to see him. That as he came through, I would get to see him before they went and admitted him. And I thought, oh, thank goodness. So I went and sat in the emergency room. which was an experience. But I sat there, and I probably was only there for maybe an hour. I don't know. It's time is so
I
not
think that's
there.
true. Yeah. When you're in like a stressful, almost survival mode, you do lose track of like
Yeah,
timing and what, even the order of things, like what happened when you're in that mode. I know
right.
that's true.
Yeah. And so I was sitting there, and I happened to see two members of a flight crew walk through, and not through the emergency room. They were like behind where, but I just saw them, and I thought, oh, I wonder if that's him. So I jumped up and I went to the desk and I asked them, and sure enough, it was, but they had already admitted him. So I couldn't go see him. And I thought, oh my gosh, now what do I do? Man, the fear and the stress, sorry, of not knowing what was happening. And so I thought, okay. So I sent him a text. He couldn't answer me, of course. He was still going through the whole, everything that was happening. And I walked out and I started walking towards my car. And as I got to my car, I looked down, there was a shiny bright penny. And I just knew that that was my grandpa. It was letting me know that he was there and he heard me, and they hear my prayers, that I don't know how they were going to be answered, but my prayers are being heard. And that meant a lot. So I got in my car and I was sitting there and I thought, gosh, what can I do? I feel so helpless. What can I do? So I thought, if I could find someone to perform a blessing for my husband, that would help me, but it would also help him so much. And I sat there and I racked my brain. I thought, who in the world can I call? Well, don't know why it took me a minute, but it dawned on me, my daughter, who is a member of the church. I could call her, and her boss also was a member of the church being the Latter-day Saints. And so I called my daughter and I said, is there any way that you can get a hold of Rebecca and ask her, is there anybody she knows that might be able to perform a blessing for Craig? And so that's my husband. So she called her and she immediately called me back. She said, of course, her husband would be more than willing to come and perform the blessing for him. And I was so thankful. And so he came and he rushed and he brought the missionaries with him, and they were going to perform a blessing. Well, they turned him away at the door because of COVID restrictions. They would not let him in. And I hadn't told my husband, prior to this, because I just didn't know if I could make it work. And I didn't want to get him really hopeful for it if it wasn't going to. And so I just called her and I said, it's okay. And I understand it's okay. And she said, well, I'm not done. She said, I'm going to call my bishop and I'm going to see if there's anything he can do. And so I said, oh my gosh, thank you so much. So she called her bishop, and this was later in the evening, by the way. This was after 9. I know that for sure. Yeah. So she called her bishop and she called me back. She said, expect a phone call. He's going to be calling you. And so he did call me and he let me know that the hospital was not in his area, but that he would be reaching out to the bishop of that area and just to see if there was anything they could do. And I'm thinking to myself, this is so late at night. It's not, it's not like it's midnight, but it's still late. People have children, they have families, they have lives. And so I got a phone call from him and he told me, I have my elders quorum president. He actually works for the hospital. And so we're going to see what he can do. They're in a meeting, but I sent him a message and hopefully he'll call you. And so I thought, oh, I hope so. I don't know if he's got his cell phone with him. I don't know any of this stuff. And so I sat there and all of a sudden I get a phone call from this number I don't know. It was the elders quorum president. He was actually a physical therapist and he worked in the campus that the hospital was on. And so he told me, he said, I will do what I can. I will try. I don't know if it's going to work, but I will try. And so I was so appreciative. I had no words, not the words that could express how appreciative I was. And so at that time I thought, I'm going to let my husband know that this is what we're trying to do. And hopefully it works out, but we're trying. So I called him and I told him, and he couldn't talk because he was so overwhelmed. But I let him know. And so we got off the phone because they were doing a lot of things to him and everything else. What I found out later from him was that he was there in his room, and it was a Catholic hospital he was in. And so they had their own clergy on staff. And he came into his room and he said, there's a gentleman here. He says he's your clergyman. Is that true? And so my husband just said, yes. never met this man, but didn't know his name, nothing. But he said, yes, yes, he is. And so he came in and they had a really good talk. My husband, prior to this, he had been inactive for a while, and I was not a member of the church at the time. It was something that we had talked about quite a bit. He wanted to become active again. I wanted to join. My daughter, as I said, was already a baptized member. I wanted to do that as well. But they had a really good talk, and he did receive a blessing. So he went into the cath lab. They did like a surgical procedure. It was placing a stent into the artery in his heart. And as it turned out, this whole thing happened because my husband was born with kind of a little anomaly in his artery where it took a 90-degree turn into his heart. So the blockage had occurred right there. And when they were in there to do it, he'd asked the doctor, is this is this repairable? Is this whatever? And he goes, well, I'm going to try. And so that's kind of a hard thing to hear. And he didn't find out until afterwards that the reason they said that is that was only the second time he'd ever seen this in his entire career.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was definitely, we're going to try. Well, as it turned out, it was successful. Thankfully. Thank you. Like I said, he did receive his blessing. Everything went really well. We passed a year mark, October 1st of 2022. And now, because of all of that, we are in Idaho, where we wanted to be in the first place. My husband retired from his job as a corrections officer. He's working again, but not as a correctional officer, thank goodness. He's too young to actually retire, so that's good. And he's training to run his first race since this. He'll be running a 10K at the end of this month, actually, with two of his daughters. So it was just a beautiful miracle, honestly.
Yeah, it's amazing. So many sweet miracles with that. Do you feel like that discovery of the anomaly in his heart, the artery, to me, that seems kind of like a miracle in itself, that they were able to discover that and correct it at that time. And so sometimes I feel like the things that we think are, and they are trials, but the hard things we go through can end up being blessings in the long run, like secret miracles, if you will. And that kind of stands out to me in this story.
Yes, I mean 100%, because if not for that, we wouldn't be where we are today, which is here in Idaho with 3 of our girls, numerous grandkids. We're closer to a son. We're where we wanted to be. We wouldn't be here. He was going to do another 5 years. We were going to make it work, and now we're here closer to family. If not for that, this wouldn't have happened. So,
yeah, I love that. I love that. And I love that you saw your penny in that time of need. And I know I have little signs from heaven that I notice, and they are so helpful when you're in a low and you just need to know you're being seen by heaven. Like, do you see me? Do you hear me? Even if your prayers aren't being answered exactly the way you want them to, at least it's an acknowledgement of, yes, I see you. And so I would encourage everyone to get even just a little symbol or a sign that is okay, this is my recognition that heaven knows me. Mine are ladybugs. When I see a ladybug, I'm like, oh, heaven sees me. And it was so funny. Was it 2 years ago? My house got invaded with ladybugs, like thousands of them. And I'm like,
wow.
oh, and it was a really hard time for me. And so it was almost like heaven. I just felt so supported. So I love things like that too. Just these sweet little miracles that are taking place that are personal to us, that no one else would know except for us. So I love that too. So, what are some of the things that you learned? How did this strengthen your testimony in God and miracles in your life?
Oh my goodness. I have to say, I've had these throughout my life, even before I was ever a member of the church, where I just know that as long as I trust in my Heavenly Father, and it's not always what we want, but if I put my trust in Him, it may take me a little bit, but I will understand why my prayers were answered the way they were. And so it helped to, again, just make me understand that He hears us. He sees us. He knows us deep within our core. It answered so many prayers because, like I said, I'm now a baptized member of the church, and my husband and I will hopefully be sealed, in the temple before the end of the year. So It's so very special to me.
I love that. I think anytime we have an experience where we know God knows us, it changes us. It's so powerful. It's like soul food. It like feeds us
Yes.
deep down to our core. And
Yes.
and those experiences are beautiful and very special. Anything else you want to share before we end?
There's just so many people that were in our path and that worked so hard to do things for us, and just to answer those prayers. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. I could never thank them enough.
Different members of different congregations coming together to help you get the desire of your heart, which was a blessing for your husband, people calling people. I do love that about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is so good at organizing service, honestly, how to meet the needs of people. And I think that's a beautiful part of being part of an organization like that people do. They know the importance of also the power in giving people blessings. And so to make that happen for you, I think is beautiful. And that you see that as a miracle, that people worked together for your good. That's what I love about these simple miracles that aren't so obvious. Like, was that a miracle? Wasn't it? Because yes, it is. Anytime we have an interaction where we know that God was helping us and there was some divine touch, I believe those are miracles. And even though we can't maybe claim, or they don't seem like they're just so extraordinary, I really believe that they are. So I'm glad you submitted your story, because I do see it as a miracle, and these miracles are happening every day. That's what I love, right? Is like these go on all the time. Do we notice it? Do we notice where God has touched our lives? And I love that you saw the hand of God in this experience. And I'm glad your husband's doing well and that his health is getting better. Are you nervous about this race coming up, or you feel like he's good to go?
I feel like he's good to go, but I'm also really nervous. I'll be just like I always am. I'll be at the starting line. I'll be at the finish line. So yeah.
Well, I love that. Well, good luck to him in the race. And I'm so happy for you that you are where you want to be, that everything has fallen into place for you in your life in this. So I love it. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
All right. I want to thank Deana for sharing her beautiful miracle story and the blessings she saw and the witness that God is aware of her and helped meet her needs and at this time. And I love that. And I love how much gratitude she expressed and how much appreciation, which I'd like to invite everyone to check out my new gratitude journal, The Blessings I Witnessed Today. It's a Bible-based gratitude journal. It's got scriptures in here to help remind you that the Lord is aware of you and he loves you. In 1 Thessalonians, it says, "In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you." Show gratitude. You can get your copy of this journal on Amazon.com. I'll leave a link in the description below. And I believe as you keep track of the things you're grateful for and the blessings in your life, you'll start noticing more and more miracles and blessings that happen. So check that out on Amazon. And thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have been enjoying the miracle stories, and I hope you have a beautiful day.